The hospital room smelled like disinfectant and broken promises. When Tyler looked me straight in the eye and said, "Sorry, Uncle Edward, but Stacy and I have a weekend planned in the Bahamas. Can't cancel. Just hire someone," I felt my ribs crack a little deeper. Not from the accident. From something else entirely. I didn't argue, didn't plead, just nodded like I understood. But in that moment, as I watched my nephew adjust his expensive watch, the one I'd bought him for Christmas, something locked into place in my mind like a precision gear. 3 days later, I hired Detective Morrison for $5,000. 2 weeks after that, I was looking at photographs of my sick daughter-in-law sipping champagne on a Barcelona beach. But let me take you back to where this really started. Back to that warm April evening when everything still felt like family should feel. The barbecue smoke drifted lazily across my backyard, mixing with the scent of desert jasmine and the faint aroma of mesquite charcoal. Tyler was flipping burgers on the grill I'd given him last Father's Day, a top-of-the-line Weber Genesis that had cost me $1,200. He was laughing at something Stacy had said about their new kitten, Pepper, who was currently batting at the wind chimes I'd hung last summer. She looked radiant in her yellow sundress, nothing like someone battling any kind of illness. The setting sun painted everything golden, casting long shadows across the desert landscape I'd worked 40 years to afford. "Uncle Edward, you've outdone yourself with this patio furniture," Stacy said, running her hand along the teak table that had cost me $4,000. "It's like something from a magazine. Architectural Digest would be jealous." "Nothing's too good for family," I replied, meaning every word. I'd spent 67 years learning that money was just paper unless you shared it with the people you loved. Martha used to say the same thing, back when she was alive, to share these evenings with me. The ice clinked in my whiskey glass as I watched Tyler adjust the heat on the grill with the confidence of someone who'd grown up coming to my house every weekend. His father, my younger brother Danny, had taught him to cook outdoors during the summers before the accident. Now Tyler moved around my backyard like he owned it, comfortable in a way that made my chest warm with something I'd thought I'd lost when Martha died. Tyler walked over, beer in hand, that easy smile on his face that reminded me so much of his father, my brother, who'd died too young in a factory accident 15 years ago. Even the way Tyler held his shoulders, slightly hunched like he was always ready to share a joke or a secret, was pure Danny. "Uncle Ed, I've been meaning to tell you how much it means to us, having you in our corner. Not everyone has family they can count on like this." He gestured around the backyard, taking in the swimming pool with its underwater lighting, the professional landscaping, the outdoor kitchen that rivaled most restaurant setups. "That's what family is for," I said, raising my own beer. "Through thick and thin. Your dad would have done the same for my kids, if Martha and I had been blessed that way." Stacy joined us, carrying the salad she'd made in my kitchen using vegetables from my garden. "Edward, I hope you know that Tyler and I consider ourselves the luckiest people in the world to have you. Some people go their whole lives without finding someone who believes in them the way you believe in us." The conversation flowed easily after that. They told me about their dreams of traveling to Europe someday, maybe taking that honeymoon they'd never been able to afford when they got married young and broke. Tyler had been working construction then. Stacy was finishing her associate's degree. They'd had their reception in the community center behind the Lutheran church, and I'd paid for the open bar because every wedding deserved at least one thing that felt luxurious. "We've been looking at those European river cruises," Stacy said, her eyes lighting up. "You know, the ones that go down the Rhine or through France. Can you imagine? Waking up in a different city every morning, having breakfast while looking at castles." "Sounds like a dream," I agreed. "Life's too short not to see the world." Tyler leaned back in his chair, the one I'd had custom-made to match the table. "Maybe someday when we've saved enough. Right now we're just focused on getting our feet under us, you know? Building something stable." I mentioned my latest acquisition, a third auto repair shop on the south side of Phoenix that was already turning a profit after only 6 months. "Sometimes I think about what I'll do with all this when I'm gone," I said, surprising myself with the admission. "Martha and I always figured we'd have kids to pass it on to. Now I guess I'll just have to trust that the people I care about will use it wisely. The look that passed between Tyler and Stacy was so quick I almost missed it. But there was something in it, something that should have set off alarm bells. Instead, I interpreted it as gratitude, maybe even embarrassment at being included in my future plans. You know, I continued, watching Stacy arrange the salad she'd brought. If you two ever need anything at all, you just ask. I mean that money sitting in bank accounts isn't doing anyone any good. Tyler's eyes brightened, and he exchanged another glance with Stacy. This one lasted longer, and I could see her give him the slightest nod. Actually, Uncle Ed, since you mention it, he set down his beer and suddenly looked older, more serious. We didn't want to say anything tonight, didn't want to spoil such a perfect evening. But what? What's wrong? The change in atmosphere was immediate. The laughter died, and even the wind chimes seemed to quiet down. Stacy's voice was barely above a whisper, and she sat down heavily in her chair like her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. I've been having some health issues, Edward. We just came from the doctor's office today. That's why we were a little late getting here. My chest tightened. What kind of health issues? Tyler reached over and took Stacy's hand, and I could see that his was shaking slightly. The doctors found some abnormalities in her blood work. They want to run extensive tests, maybe do some imaging. The insurance will cover some of it, but not everything, Stacy finished. She touched her stomach gently, the same gesture I'd seen Martha make when she was worried about something. They're talking about specialists, maybe even experimental treatments if the tests come back positive for what they're afraid of. The word cancer hung in the air without being spoken, and I felt my world tilt slightly off its axis. Not Stacy. Not the sweet girl who'd brought light back into Tyler's life after he'd spent his 20s drifting from job to job, relationship to relationship. What are we looking at financially? I asked, already mentally moving money between accounts. Tyler's face crumpled slightly. $85,000 for the initial round of treatments and tests. Maybe more depending on what they find. I know it's a huge amount to ask, and we haven't even been married that long, and you've already done so much for us. Stop, I interrupted, standing up so quickly my chair scraped against the flagstone. Don't you dare apologize for being sick. Don't you dare apologize for needing help. I looked at both of them, these two young people who'd become the closest thing to children I'd ever have. We'll get you the best doctors, the best treatment. Money is not going to be what stands between Stacy and her health. Not while I'm breathing. The relief that washed over their faces was everything I'd hoped to see and everything that would later haunt me. Stacy started crying, not the pretty tears of movies, but the ugly, grateful sobs of someone who'd been carrying a terrible weight alone. Tyler's shoulders sagged like he'd been holding his breath for hours. Thank you, Stacy whispered. Thank you, thank you. I was so scared, Edward. I kept thinking about my Aunt Caroline, the one who died when I was 16. The way she just wasted away because they caught it too late. I can't be that person. I can't do that to Tyler. You won't be, I promised, already planning to call my banker first thing Monday morning. We're going to fight this with everything we have. Tyler wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, and for a moment he looked 12 years old again. The age he'd been when his father died and the world became a scarier place. I don't know how we'll ever repay you, Uncle Ed. You don't repay family, I said firmly. You just pass it forward when someone else needs help. We spent the rest of the evening making plans. Tyler would call the specialist's office on Monday to schedule the first round of tests. Stacy would take leave from her job at the dental office so she could focus on getting better. I would handle all the financial arrangements and make sure they had everything they needed. As they were leaving that night, Stacy hugged me tighter than she ever had before. I'm going to beat this, she whispered in my ear. And when I do, I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you know how grateful I am. If only I'd known I was looking at 2 Academy Award-worthy performances. That was 6 months ago. Now, lying in this hospital bed with 3 broken ribs and a punctured lung, I was getting a very different kind of performance. Tyler shifted his weight from foot to foot, checking his phone every few seconds like he was expecting an important call. Stacy stood by the window, not looking at me but instead admiring her manicure, a professional gel job that had cost more than some people made in a week. The same hands that had trembled with illness 6 months ago now sported a diamond tennis bracelet I'd never seen before, catching the afternoon light like tiny stars. The hospital room smelled like disinfectant and broken promises, but also like the expensive perfume Stacy was wearing. Something French and costly that definitely hadn't been in her collection the last time we'd had dinner. "So you can't help me out for just 1 week?" I asked again, my voice hoarse from the breathing tube they'd removed that morning. "Just keep an eye on the main shop while I recover? Make sure Jose doesn't try to shortcut the break jobs again." Tyler glanced at his watch. A different watch than the one I'd bought him for his birthday. This one was Swiss, expensive, the kind of timepiece that cost more than most people made in 6 months. "Look, Uncle Ed," Tyler said, and I noticed he wasn't meeting my eyes anymore. Hadn't met them since he'd walked into the room 30 minutes ago. "I would love to help, I really would, but we booked this trip months ago. The deposits were non-refundable, and you know how it is with these luxury resorts." "Luxury resorts?" I repeated slowly. "I thought you said it was doctor's orders. Rest and relaxation for Stacy's recovery." "Right. Exactly," Stacy added quickly, finally turning from the window. "The oncologist, Dr. Peterson, he specifically recommended tropical climates for the recovery phase. Something about the negative ions from ocean air helping with cellular regeneration." Dr. Peterson. That was interesting. I'd never heard that name before. "The Bahamas," Tyler continued, warming to his story. 5 stars, all-inclusive. The kind of place where they bring you drinks with little umbrellas while you're lying on the beach. Stacy needs that kind of stress-free environment after everything she's been through. I nodded slowly, each movement sending fire through my chest. Of course, after everything she's been through. How much did that kind of recovery cost? Another glance between them, quicker this time. "The medical aspect was covered by insurance," Stacy said. "But the resort itself, well, we figured it was an investment in my long-term health." "An investment," I repeated. "That's one way to put it." "I thought the treatment was finished," I said carefully, watching their faces. "Oh, it is," Tyler rushed to explain, his words coming faster now. "The doctors say Stacy responded better than anyone expected. Clean scans across the board. But you know how it is with cancer, I mean the condition she had, the recovery process can be just as draining as the treatment itself." "The condition she had," I repeated. "What condition was that exactly? I don't think we ever got a specific diagnosis." Stacy's hand went to her throat, a nervous gesture I'd never seen from her before. "It was, well, the doctors used a lot of technical terms. Precancerous cells, they said. Caught early, thankfully, but still requiring aggressive intervention." "Precancerous," I said. "And the treatment for that cost $85,000? "The initial consultation and testing phase," Tyler corrected. "Plus the preventive therapy. Better safe than sorry, right?" They'd rehearsed this, I realized. They'd sat somewhere, probably in my BMW, using my gas, and practiced these answers. Coordinated their story so the details would match if anyone asked questions. Of course, better safe than sorry. I shifted slightly in the hospital bed, wincing as my ribs reminded me why I was there. "How long will you be in the Bahamas?" 2 weeks, Stacy said. "Maybe 3 if we decide to extend. The doctor said the longer I can stay in that healing environment, the better." 3 weeks, I repeated. "And there's no way you could postpone? Just until I'm back on my feet." Tyler finally looked directly at me, and what I saw in his eyes wasn't guilt or apology. It was irritation, annoyance that I was making this difficult for him. "Uncle Ed, I know this timing is bad, but we've been planning this recovery trip for months. The resort, the flights, everything's already paid for. And honestly, after what we've been through this year, we need this. We deserve this. We deserve this." Those 4 words hung in the air like smoke from a fire that was just starting to catch. They left 20 minutes later, Tyler patting my shoulder with all the warmth of a business handshake, Stacy blowing me a kiss from the doorway. Through the window, I watched them climb into the BMW I'd given them, the same BMW I was still making payments on for $137 every month. The same BMW that was supposed to help Tyler get to job interviews, back when he was between opportunities, and I believed his story about wanting to turn his life around. That was when the first domino fell in my mind. Not crashed down, just tilted, ever so slightly, toward the truth. I stared at the ceiling tiles and began to remember things. Really remember them. It started with the first check. $85,000 written on a Tuesday morning in my kitchen, while Stacy sat across from me describing her symptoms with the precision of someone who'd researched them thoroughly. The way she'd touched her temple when she talked about headaches. Always the same spot, always the same gentle pressure. The way Tyler had provided medical terminology that I'd later realized sounded rehearsed, like lines from a play he'd memorized. The way they'd both insisted on seeing a specialist in California, too far away for me to visit or verify, too convenient for me to check up on. That same kitchen where I'd signed the check was where my late wife Martha used to balance our books every Sunday morning. Coffee growing cold as she worked through our expenses with the dedication of an accountant. She'd been the careful one, the skeptical one, the one who wrote down every expense in her neat handwriting and questioned every unusual purchase. "Edward," she'd say, tapping her pen against the checkbook, "money isn't about being rich, it's about being free to choose kindness. But kindness without wisdom is just stupidity with good intentions." If Martha had been alive, she would have asked questions I was too trusting to ask. She would have wanted to meet the doctors, see the test results, understand the treatment plan. But Martha had been dead for 3 years, and I'd been so lonely, so grateful to have family that felt like family, that I'd abandoned every ounce of the caution she'd taught me. The second check had been $25,000 for rehabilitation. Tyler had explained that Stacy needed specialized therapy that wasn't covered by insurance, some kind of cutting-edge treatment that combined physical therapy with psychological counseling to help cancer patients rebuild their strength and confidence. He'd looked so earnest sitting in my living room, the same living room where I'd taught him to play chess when he was 12, where I'd helped him with his homework when his father was working double shifts at the factory. The same room where I'd promised his dying father that I'd always look out for the boy, that Danny's son would never want for anything as long as I was alive. "She's embarrassed about it," Tyler had said, not meeting my eyes. "The treatment involves some personal issues. Body image stuff, you know? The cancer scare really messed with her head." I'd written the check without asking for details, thinking I was being respectful of Stacy's privacy. Now I realized I'd been played by someone who knew exactly which of my buttons to push. The third check, $15,000 for experimental medications, had been written in my office at the auto shop, the same office where I'd worked 16-hour days for 40 years, building something I was proud of from nothing but determination and a willingness to get my hands dirty. Tyler had come by during lunch, looking worried and desperate in a way that now seemed calculated. "The insurance company is fighting us on the new drugs," he'd said, slumping into the chair across from my desk like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. "They say it's experimental, not proven effective. But Uncle Ed, these pills are the difference between Stacy having a normal life and spending the next 5 years wondering if every headache is the cancer coming back. Something I was building for family, I'd thought as I wrote that check. Something that would matter after I was gone." Each memory came with a price tag now. Each price tag came with Tyler's earnest face and Stacy's tears of gratitude. Tears that had seemed so real, had felt so necessary to comfort. The apartment deposit when they'd been evicted, $3,000 because their previous landlord had unfairly blamed them for damage they hadn't caused. The credit cards I'd co-signed when Tyler's credit wasn't good enough, currently carrying $8,000 in debt for necessities, while Stacy was too sick to work. The car insurance I'd taken over when they couldn't afford it during the medical crisis, $215 every month for coverage on a car I'd given them but still owned. Lying in that hospital bed, I did the math with the precision of someone who'd spent 4 decades balancing books and calculating profit margins. $140,000 in 8 months, plus the BMW worth $45,000, plus the ongoing monthly expenses I'd absorbed without thinking about it. Nearly $200,000 to help a sick family member. except there had been no sick family member. I didn't cry. I calculated. When the nurse came to check my vitals that evening, she found me staring at my phone with an expression she later described to her colleagues as eerily calm. "Mr. Mitchell? How are you feeling? Your heart rate seems elevated." "Like I've been blind for 8 months," I answered, my voice steady in a way that surprised me. "But my vision is clearing up nicely." She checked my chart, probably wondering if head trauma from the accident was causing confusion. "Are you experiencing any dizziness? Nausea? Sometimes patients have delayed reactions to the medication." "No," I said, still staring at my phone where Tyler's contact information glowed on the screen. "I'm experiencing clarity for the first time in a very long while." The next morning, I hired Detective Morrison. Morrison was a thin man in his 50s who looked like he'd seen every kind of human disappointment possible and had cataloged them all in filing cabinets behind his eyes. His office smelled like coffee and skepticism, with undertones of old cigarette smoke that had probably been soaked into the furniture for decades. The walls were lined with certificates and commendations, but also with photographs that told stories: reunited families, recovered stolen property, justice served in small, important ways. "Family fraud is more common than you'd think," he said, sliding a contract across his desk. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind that suggested Morrison's services weren't cheap but were probably worth every penny. "The closer the relationship, the easier it is to exploit trust. Blood relatives are actually the most successful con artists because the victims want to believe them. They have built-in credibility that strangers have to earn." "What exactly do you need me to find?" "The truth," I said, and the word felt solid in my mouth, like something I could build on. "About where my money really went. About whether my nephew's wife was ever actually sick. About whether I've been the victim of the most elaborate scam of my life." Morrison leaned back in his chair, which creaked like it had been listening to confessions for years. "Truth is expensive, Mr. Mitchell. But lies are usually more expensive in the long run. What's your budget for this kind of investigation?" "Whatever it takes," I said, and meant it. If they've stolen from me, I want to know how much and when. If they've lied to me, I want documented proof that will hold up in court. And if they've made a fool out of me, I want enough evidence to make sure they can't do it to anyone else." "Fair enough." Morrison made some notes on a legal pad, his handwriting quick and precise. "I'll need copies of all the checks you wrote them, any correspondence about medical treatments, bank records if you have them, and access to any social media accounts they might have. People who are running scams like this usually can't resist documenting their success online." "Social media?" "Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. If they've been living high on your money, they've probably been posting about it. Nobody takes a European vacation without bragging to their friends about it. It's human nature, especially for people who've never had money before. European vacation." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What makes you think they went to Europe?" Morrison smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. It was the smile of someone who'd seen this exact scenario play out dozens of times before. "Mr. Mitchell, in my experience, when someone steals $85,000 by claiming medical expenses, they don't spend it on medical expenses. They spend it on the kind of life they always wanted but could never afford. And for most young couples in America who suddenly have access to serious money, that means European travel. It's the dream that seems most impossible when you're broke. So it's the first thing people buy when they get their hands on someone else's cash." I paid his retainer fee, $5,000, with the satisfaction of a man making his first good financial decision in months. Morrison worked fast and he worked thoroughly. Within a week, he'd pulled credit reports, social media archives, travel records, and financial statements. He'd interviewed neighbors, contacted airlines, and traced every dollar I'd given Tyler and Stacy through a maze of accounts and expenditures that painted a picture clearer than any photograph. The story that emerged was told in passport stamps and Instagram posts, in credit card receipts and hotel reservations, in lies so elaborate and well-coordinated that they deserved some kind of award for creative fiction. Tyler and Stacy had indeed traveled to California in June, not for medical treatment, but to catch a flight to Paris. While I'd been worried about Stacy's chemotherapy sessions. They'd been touring the Louvre and taking selfies in front of the Eiffel Tower. While I'd been researching specialists and treatment options online, they'd been posting pictures from Rome, Barcelona, and Nice, living the European honeymoon they'd claimed they couldn't afford. The rehabilitation facility in Arizona that had supposedly cost $25,000, Morrison had driven to the address Tyler had given me. It was a vacant lot behind a strip mall that contained a dry cleaner, a nail salon, and a store that sold discounted auto parts. The experimental medications that had required $15,000? The pharmacy records Morrison obtained through legal channels showed exactly 3 prescriptions in Stacy's name over the past year: birth control pills, allergy medication for seasonal hay fever, and an antifungal cream for athlete's foot. Total cost, $87.43. But the photograph that broke something permanent in my chest was dated September 15th. The same day Tyler had called me, crying, to say that Stacy was having complications and needed emergency surgery that would cost another $12,000. In the photograph, Stacy was healthy and laughing, wearing a bikini that probably cost more than most people's monthly car payment, raising a champagne glass on what looked like a yacht somewhere in the Mediterranean. Tyler was beside her, tanned and relaxed, wearing designer sunglasses and a smile that had nothing to do with medical crises or family emergencies. I studied that photograph for an hour, memorizing every detail. The tan lines that spoke of weeks in the sun, not days in hospital beds. The designer sunglasses I'd never seen before, the kind that cost more than some people made in a week. The watch on Tyler's wrist that definitely hadn't been the cheap Timex I'd bought him for his college graduation. This was Swiss, expensive, the kind of timepiece that served as both jewelry and investment. But what hurt most was the expression on their faces. They looked like people celebrating something, like people who'd just pulled off the victory of their lives. There was no worry there, no concern about Stacy's health or their financial future. There was only the satisfaction of people who'd gotten away with something big. Morrison delivered his final report on a Thursday afternoon, 300 pages of documented lies, complete with a timeline, financial trail, bank records, travel documents, and enough evidence to support fraud charges in any court in the country. "They're good," Morrison admitted as I flipped through the evidence with hands that were steadier than I'd expected. "Very good. They created believable stories, maintained consistent details over 8 months, even set up forwarding addresses for fake medical bills. This wasn't amateur hour, Mr. Mitchell. This was professional-level deception." "How long do you think they were planning this?" "Based on the credit applications, the timing of their lease termination, and some of the preparatory financial moves I found, I'd say they started setting this up at least a year ago. Maybe longer. The European trip was booked in February, 3 months before Stacy's supposed diagnosis. They knew exactly what they were doing and when they were going to do it. And they knew I would help them. They were counting on it. They studied you, Mr. Mitchell. They knew about your wife's death, your feelings about family, your history of generosity. They probably spent months figuring out exactly how to present their story in a way that would make you want to help without asking too many questions. I paid Morrison's final bill, another $3,000 that felt like the best money I'd ever spent, and drove home with a trunk full of evidence and a heart full of something that wasn't quite anger. Anger was hot and messy and led to poor decisions. This was something else. Something precise and methodical and absolutely certain about what needed to happen next. That night, I sat in my kitchen with a legal pad and a calculator, the same kitchen where Martha used to balance our books, the same kitchen where I'd written the first check to Tyler and Stacy. Not to plan revenge. Revenge was emotional and satisfying and ultimately empty. I was planning justice, which required mathematics and patience and the kind of systematic thinking that had built my business from nothing. The numbers were clear. $193,000 in direct losses, not counting the ongoing monthly expenses and the emotional damage of 8 months spent worrying about someone who was never in danger. But the real calculation wasn't financial. It was about trust, about the violation of something sacred that couldn't be measured in dollars. About the fact that Tyler and Stacy hadn't just stolen money. They'd stolen my grief for a woman who was never sick, my worry for a family that was never in crisis, my willingness to sacrifice my own comfort for people I thought needed help. They'd stolen 8 months of my life that I'd spent losing sleep over someone else's fake problems, 8 months of conversations with doctors who'd never heard of my niece, 8 months of research into treatments and specialists and experimental drugs that were never prescribed to anyone. By 3 in the morning, I had a plan. Not a revenge fantasy born of hurt feelings, but a systematic approach to reclaiming what was mine and ensuring that Tyler and Stacy faced the consequences of their choices. Step 1. Verification. I called Tyler at 9 a.m. sharp, my voice as steady as if I were calling to check on the weather. "How's Stacy feeling this morning?" "Oh, much better, Uncle Ed. Much better. The doctors say she's responding well to the latest round of medications. She's resting today, but the improvement is really remarkable. We're so relieved." "That's wonderful news. What medications are those again?" "I want to research them. Make sure she's getting the best possible care." A pause. Just half a second, but enough. It's complicated medical names, you know how doctors are with their terminology. I'd have to check the bottles and get back to you." "Of course. No rush. Tell me, what's the name of her oncologist again?" "Dr. Peterson," Tyler said quickly. Too quickly. "Dr. James Peterson at the Arizona Cancer Center." I wrote the name down, even though I already knew from Morrison's report that no Dr. James Peterson worked at any cancer center in Arizona. "Well, give her my love." "Will do." "Hey, Uncle Ed, we're still planning that Bahamas trip next week. For Stacy's recovery, you know. The doctors really think the change of scenery will help complete her healing process." "Of course. Recovery is important. Have a wonderful time." After I hung up, I called the Arizona Cancer Center and asked to speak with Dr. James Peterson. The receptionist was polite but puzzled. No Dr. Peterson had ever worked there in any capacity. Step 2. Legal consultation. Attorney Jennifer Walsh had been handling my business contracts for 15 years. She was expensive, thorough, and had never lost a case that went to trial. Her office was in one of the newer high-rises downtown, with a view of the mountains that reminded clients they were paying for the best. "This is fraud," she said after reviewing Morrison's evidence for 20 minutes. Her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose like a judge examining critical evidence. "Clear, documented, prosecutable fraud. The question isn't whether we can win. The question is how much you want to recover and how public you want this to become. I want it all back. Every penny. And I want them to understand that actions have consequences. Civil court will get you the money, assuming they still have it. Criminal charges will get you satisfaction and make sure they can't do this to anyone else. Let's file both. I want them to face everything the law allows." She made notes on her legal pad, calculating fees and timelines with the efficiency of someone who'd handled hundreds of fraud cases. "The criminal charges will take precedence. If the DA thinks there's enough evidence for prosecution, and based on what I'm seeing here, they'll file charges within 30 days. The civil suit can proceed simultaneously." "How long before they know what's coming?" "Once we file, they'll be served within 72 hours. After that, it becomes a matter of public record. If they're smart, they'll hire lawyers immediately. If they're not," she shrugged, "well, stupid criminals make my job easier." Step 3. Asset recovery. The BMW had been registered in Tyler's name for convenience, but I was still the primary on the loan, still responsible for the monthly payments that came out of my business account automatically. A simple call to the finance company and a repo order later, the car would be collected within 72 hours. "Yes, sir, Mr. Mitchell. As the primary loan holder, you have the right to request repossession at any time. Our recovery team can have the vehicle picked up as early as tomorrow morning." Tomorrow morning would be perfect. The credit cards I'd co-signed were immediately canceled with calls that took less than 10 minutes each. The $8,000 in current charges would become Tyler's responsibility alone, payable in full within 30 days or subject to collection action. The apartment lease they'd broken with my help as guarantor had been another lie, I discovered. A call to the property management company revealed that Tyler and Stacy had never been evicted from their previous place for property damage. They'd simply wanted to move somewhere more expensive, a luxury complex with a pool and fitness center, and needed me to guarantee a lease they couldn't afford on their own. They gave their notice properly and left the apartment in perfect condition, the manager told me. Actually, they were model tenants. We were sorry to see them go. They said they were moving because they'd had a family windfall and could afford something nicer. Family windfall. That was one way to describe stolen money. But the real revelation came from step 4, the money trail. My accountant, Harold Kim, had been managing my books for 20 years. He was precise, methodical, and had the kind of suspicious mind that made him excellent at finding discrepancies. I asked him to trace every penny I'd given Tyler and Stacy, to follow the money through whatever accounts and transactions he could legally access. He spread the bank statements across his conference table like evidence in a murder trial. Edward, I need you to see something that's going to make you very angry. He pointed to a series of deposits in Tyler's account that perfectly matched my checks, minus small amounts that had been transferred elsewhere. They weren't just spending your money on vacations and luxury items. They were saving it. Systematically. Saving it. Look at these transfers. Every time you gave them money for medical expenses, 20 to 30% went into a high-yield savings account. They weren't just scamming you for fun money or to pay bills. They were building a nest egg with your cash. The savings account contained $67,000. Money they'd skimmed from my generosity while claiming poverty, while describing their desperation, while crying about their fear of medical bankruptcy. That's when I understood the true scope of what they'd done. This wasn't desperate people making desperate choices in a crisis. This was premeditated, calculated theft from someone who loved them, executed with patience and precision over 8 months. They'd stolen from me not just to live well, but to build wealth. My wealth. The repo truck came for the BMW on a Tuesday morning. I was waiting across the street in my truck when Tyler came running out of his apartment building in his bathrobe, shouting at the driver. There's been a mistake. This is my car. The repo agent was professionally polite. Sir, the primary loan holder has requested repossession due to non-payment. But I make the payments. I make them every month. Sir, you'll need to contact the loan company to resolve this issue. I watched Tyler frantically dial his phone, probably calling me. I let it go to voicemail. The civil lawsuit papers were served that afternoon while Tyler and Stacy were at lunch. The waitress later told Morrison, whom I'd asked to observe, that Stacy had started crying right there in the restaurant, and Tyler had swept all the papers into his briefcase like they were contaminated. They called me that evening. Uncle Ed, there's been some kind of mistake. Tyler's voice was tight, controlled. Some legal papers were delivered today, something about fraud charges. It has to be identity theft or something. No mistake, Tyler. A long pause. What do you mean, no mistake? I mean that Detective Morrison did very thorough work. The photographs from your European vacation are particularly interesting. Stacy looked remarkably healthy for someone undergoing chemotherapy. Silence. Then Stacy's voice in the background. Oh God, he knows. Uncle Ed, I can explain. No need to explain. The evidence speaks for itself. You have 72 hours to return the $67,000 you've saved from the money you stole from me. After that, the criminal charges are filed. Uncle Ed, please, we can work this out. We're family. Family doesn't lie to each other about cancer, Tyler. Family doesn't steal from each other. Family doesn't abandon each other in hospital beds. I hung up. They tried everything over the next 3 days. Text messages begging for forgiveness. Voicemails explaining that they'd been planning to pay me back all along. Stacy even showed up at my house claiming she really had been sick, just not with what they'd originally said. I didn't answer the door. On Friday, exactly 72 hours later, Detective Morrison delivered the criminal complaint to the district attorney's office. By Monday morning, Tyler and Stacy were facing charges of wire fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy to commit theft. I scheduled a family dinner. The invitation went out to everyone. My sister Janet, my brother-in-law Robert, my cousin Patricia and her husband Mike, and Tyler's mother Linda. Everyone who'd watched Tyler grow up. Everyone who thought of Tyler as a good kid who'd married a sweet girl. The dinner was held at Romano's, the same Italian restaurant where we'd celebrated Tyler's wedding 3 years earlier. I'd reserved the private dining room and told everyone I had important family news to share. Thank you all for coming, I said. standing at the head of the table after the appetizers had been served. "I asked you here tonight because family should know the truth about family." I connected my laptop to the room's projection screen. 8 months ago, Tyler and Stacy came to me with news that Stacy was seriously ill. They needed help with medical expenses. Being family, I helped. The first slide showed a timeline. I gave them $85,000 for initial treatment. Murmurs of sympathy around the table. Linda squeezed Stacy's hand supportively. But then something interesting happened. The slide was the photograph Morrison had found Stacy in her bikini, champagne glass raised, yacht deck gleaming in Mediterranean sunshine. While I was worried about Stacy's chemotherapy treatments, she was actually on vacation in Europe. The silence in the room was absolute. I clicked through more photographs. Tyler and Stacy at the Eiffel Tower. Stacy shopping in Barcelona. Tyler raising a wine glass in an expensive restaurant in Rome. Every date, every location, corresponds exactly to when they told me Stacy was too sick to leave her bed. Linda's face had gone white. "Tyler? What is this?" The next slides showed the financial evidence. The fake medical bills. The non-existent treatment facility. The savings account where they'd been storing the money they'd skimmed from my checks. $193,000. I said. "That's what it cost me to learn that Tyler and Stacy are professional liars." As of Monday, Tyler and Stacy are facing fraud charges in both civil and criminal court. The BMW has been repossessed. The credit cards have been canceled. And the $67,000 they saved from stealing from me has been frozen by court order. Tyler finally looked up. "Uncle Ed, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly. You saw someone who loved you, and you decided to exploit that love for profit." The trial lasted 3 days. Tyler and Stacy's attorney tried to argue that this was a family misunderstanding, but Morrison's evidence was overwhelming. The jury awarded me $95,000 in damages. The judge added another $20,000 in punitive damages and court costs. Tyler got 18 months probation and 500 hours of community service. Stacy got 12 months probation. Both were ordered to have no contact with me and to repay the full judgment within 3 years. I ran into Tyler about a year later at a grocery store. He was wearing a uniform shirt with a name tag, working as a cashier. The designer clothes were gone. The expensive watch was gone. He looked tired, older, like someone carrying a weight he couldn't put down. "Uncle Ed," he said when he saw me in his line. His voice was quiet, careful. "Tyler, I want you to know I think about what we did every day. I know you probably don't believe that, but it's true." I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since the restaurant. He did look like someone who'd learned something hard about consequences. "I believe you," I said, "but thinking about it doesn't change it. Stacy and we're not together anymore. Turns out when you build a relationship online to other people, it's hard to trust each other." As I walked toward the parking lot, Tyler called after me, "Uncle Ed, do you think, someday, is there any chance you could forgive us?" I stopped, turned back. Tyler looked so young standing there in his cashier's uniform, so much like the 12-year-old I taught to play chess. "Tyler," I said, "forgiveness isn't about what you deserve. It's about what I choose to carry. And I've decided not to carry anger. So you forgive us?" "I forgive you for my own peace. But that doesn't mean I'll ever trust you again. And it doesn't mean there's a place for you in my family. That was 2 years ago. My business is thriving. I opened 2 more locations with the money I recovered from the lawsuit. I remarried last spring. A wonderful woman named Claire who owns a bookstore and understands that trust is something you build carefully and protect fiercely. Tyler still works at that grocery store as far as I know. Stacy moved back to her hometown in Ohio. Linda and I exchange Christmas cards, but we don't talk about Tyler. The money they stole and spent is gone forever. But the money I recovered has grown into something better. A new life built on honesty. A new family chosen carefully. And the knowledge that I'm nobody's easy mark. Sometimes people ask me if I regret being so hard on Tyler and Stacy. They say family should forgive family. That blood is thicker than water. But I learned something important lying in that hospital bed 2 years ago. Blood may be thicker than water, but trust is thicker than blood. And when someone breaks your trust while taking advantage of your love, the relationship dies. What's left afterward isn't family anymore. It's just shared DNA and expensive lessons. The real family, the family I choose now, knows that my generosity comes with responsibility attached. They know that love is precious specifically because it can be lost. They know that trust is a privilege, not a right. And they know that kindness without boundaries isn't kindness at all. It's just an invitation to be exploited. If you liked this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your impressions in the comments below. Every story of betrayal and justice helps others recognize the warning signs and find the courage to stand up for themselves.